are back with another episode. This week, we're getting into a lot of talking about updates. I know a couple of episodes ago we were talking about the job market, and we were letting you guys know that I was on the in the market search. So finally, found a position. So we're gonna have a discussion about that. Before we get into all of that, Frank, how was your week?
Yeah, the week has been pretty good. I can't complain. And congrats on getting your next gig. And yeah, I'm excited about getting into this show. This show's gonna be uh, a little different, like every show is. And I'm gonna do the same thing I think I did the last time. Just gonna say a quick prayer, and then we'll get popping.
Okay.
Dear Father God, we thank you for everyone that will come on and check out our stream. Father, we ask for your guidance and we give you all the glory. Pray blessings on everyone that will check this out later. And we pray that it brings people closer to a goal so that they can ultimately do their part in the earth. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So, I'm going to get right into it
Okay.
because, things are different and people have questions. So let me start off here. Would you say that relevant that resumes are still relevant? So
Yes.
based upon your experience, I know that you've had a few different opportunities to potentially use a resume. Are they still relevant?
Absolutely. I think more dependent on what I think with that whichever industry you're in or whatever type of job you're applying for, I think it's extremely relevant. And mainly the biggest part of a resume is that's somewhat of what you have to control whatever interview you're going to be in. So a lot of interviewers or recruiters, they're looking at your resume and that's what they're looking to see if you're matching up with what they're looking for that position. And if you have control over what you've listed on your resume and you're confident about everything that you put on your resume, then that allows you to control the narrative going into an interview. So if you say, I worked at this company and while I was there, I did X, Y, and Z, then you go into that interview with something to talk about and to elaborate on and speak about with a confidence that will showcase that you know what you're talking about when you're for whatever position that you're applying for.
Cool. So based upon your experience, how much homework should a person do about the company they're going into? Because it's one thing for you to provide them your resume, but how much how much are they expecting you to know about them when the interview takes place?
That's a good question. Homework on the company specifically, you should have a good amount of homework done on them. You need to know what their values are, how that lines up with your personal values. Of course, you need to know what type of project they're doing or what type of company they're running in general. So if I'm taking it off of like development, if you're applying for a fast food job, I would think you should know if you like that food or not. If it's like I would always say, regardless of what job you want, you want your values to align with whatever company, even if it's something as simple as fast food or working at your local supermarket. It's things you want to kind of work in places that you shop at, or work with products that you use, because then you'll have a certain amount of care when you're dealing with the customers. So I tell people on this channel all the time. I used to work at Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut was that was really my dream job, and probably still is, just because I love pizza. So I was able to translate my love for pizza to the customers, and be an effective employee at that time in my life. So definitely know a lot about the company. In higher level interviews, it's extremely important to know what skills you need to highlight based on what company and position that you're going for. So if it's a company that, you know, let's say that they value collaboration, so then if you know that that's one of that company's values, then on your resume you won't want to have instances where you can kind of lean into talking about how good you are at collaboration. So that's kind of how you can set up and structure your interviews in order to kind of put you in the driver's seat, so you're not kind of being taken anywhere in the interview, because they can make a left turn very quickly.
So I keep hearing you use the word values. So where is it that a person can go to find out what those values are for companies?
Yeah, so any company, any legitimate company, you should be able to find their website. And it's as simple as going to their About Me page or About the Company page, and just kind of giving it a quick read through, see what the language that they're using in it. Is this website geared more towards the public, or is it geared towards people who are looking for a job? Um, and a lot of their About Me pages will have, or sometimes they'll even have our own tab called core values, things like that, depending on what level of company you're dealing with. And that should be the starting point. A lot of times it may seem like basic things, but that's what that company is choosing to highlight, and that's what's important to them. So as someone who's interviewing, you want to make sure that you're able to present those values and make sure that those values align with yours, to make sure that it's a good fit for not just the company but for you as well.
And for seasoned professionals, a lot of people would know how important it is to have some information about the potential employer. However, for a lot of people who are just entering the workforce, this might be some game we're putting them up on. So be clear that, especially if you're looking for a high level job, there is an expectation that you're coming into the interview with some knowledge about that company. So do exactly what Dre said. Do some research, because as as an executive coach, I've had an opportunity to help people get some high level jobs. And one of the things that usually will set that person apart is how well they're able to talk about that organization's culture. Because what you want to do is you want to make the employer feel as though you're ready to just blend right in. But if they're having to, now, of course, you're going to ask questions also and show curiosity, because going on their website is not going to tell you everything. And you can, if you're talking about a place like Pizza Hut, you can always go there and spy. For a teenager that's thinking about working at Chick-fil-A, you might already eat at Chick-fil-A, but now if you're deciding to work at Chick-fil-A, before you interview, you might go and just sit there and watch and say, okay, see what the process is. So that's good stuff. Now, let me ask you this, Dre. In previous shows, we've talked about using technology tools like AI. Can a person use AI to write their resume?
uh, Definitely to get a starting point. I mean, really, you could honestly copy and paste it from AI. I would suggest just formatting it a little bit better. So, but in terms of the content, you would basically tell AI what you've done at previous positions, kind of. So you have to do some work. Yes, it can make you a resume, but you have to put in a little bit of effort.
Okay,
So,
I was thinking that that was the ultimate answer, so I
mhm.
just needed to get that out there because again, some people get in trouble because if it looks too cookie cutter, it might not be a good thing, right?
I mean, so there's different layers of resumes that you have to do. So you have to have a resume that gets by the AI that's looking for keywords, and then you have to make sure that it looks visually appeasing to the human recruiter that you'll probably be in contact with. When you're first starting out, you have to my method is taking the job description, or I've already had a resume, so I take my resume, I give it to Chat GPT. I take a job description, give it to Chat GPT, and say, ask it to kind of customize my experience in the best way that will showcase that I'm prepared for this job that I put the job description in for. And so then it will just keep the same experience that I've done, but just word it in a way to where it's matching up with the job description to make sure that, one, it's getting past the AI, then two, when a actual recruiter sees it, then it makes it easier for them to spot out the words, because the truth is a lot of people aren't reading these full resumes. They're skimming through them and looking for keywords. So with that, you know you have to make sure that you're putting the right jargon in there in order for your resume to get noticed and picked out amongst the thousands of resumes. So, and one thing I noticed was, um, while I've been on my journey, I was putting my resume on job boards. One of them was dice.com. I was putting it on Indeed just because that's a standard one. LinkedIn, which all of them have their ups and downs, some real opportunities, some not. But I digress from that. So when you don't constantly update your resume, then the recruiters start calling. So that let me know is your resume is not getting sent to the top you know, every for every position. So the longer ago that you changed it or updated it, then it just gets pushed further and further down the queue. And recruiters, they might have seen your resume before, and so just be like, oh, that person's skills didn't match up with it exactly, so then they just continue to write you off. So you have to pretty much have an updated resume every week, or tweak something if you didn't get a position the previous week.
How does the person know what keywords to put in there? How does one know go about that?
The job description. So you have to find the job description, and the job description will tell you how many years of school may be required, or saying that maybe in some cases you don't need a degree at all. That'll be said in the job description. The languages that they're for tech, a lot of the languages that they're going to be using and expecting you to know will be in the job description. Um, and I think that's across any type of position. For project managers, they want you to know what tools to be familiar with, and the tools that that company might use. So that might also take some research. If you know that a company um, is working with Google, for their back end or something, then maybe you want to search up some Google tools, make sure that you understand them. And there's people would be tempted to put tools that they haven't worked with directly. Maybe you've worked with a version of that of that tool, but just anything that you put on your resume, you need to be ready to talk about it in depth as well. So be careful what you put on your resume, because it can land you in some embarrassing situations.
That's right, because if they see something on your resume and then they call you on it, especially in technology, because
Hmm.
they expect when they start using certain terms and you you can't respond because you only you only dabbled in it
Yep.
and you gave them the impression that you
You
were
got
immersed
five
in
years
it.
of
Those are two
experience with
different
it.
things.
Hmm.
There's a difference between putting your pinky finger in the bath water and getting in it.
Yes, it is. But at the same time, so that's where some people have to challenge themselves because sometimes there's a language that's very prevalent and you need to a lot of positions may be looking for this technology. So in order to make yourself look attractive for the position, you might have to say that, and then but it's then your responsibility to study up on that information and make sure that you're able to answer those questions as a professional would. So that's one of the risks that, and I know a lot of people, especially when they're brand new into the tech field, they're hesitant about saying what technologies they've worked with because they don't know how proficient they would be with them, or maybe they used it at their previous company, but still not comfortable enough to talk about it. So but that's something that you need to prepare for. And if there's anything that you're consistently seeing on these job descriptions that you don't know what it is, then it's your responsibility to do the research and make sure that you're able to answer questions based on that.
And not to digress, but I think this is important because when we talk about your field, the tech field, there's so many different specializations in that field.
Hmm.
And I think you did a really interesting and important show last week. You want to just give people a snapshot of what you guys talked about last week, and you know, I encourage people to check it out.
Yeah, last week had my good friend Nigel Jones on, and he was a DevOps developer. Now he's more of a lead senior developer on the back end. Um, DevOps is kind of the developers for developers,
Wow.
in the sense. So they're creating a lot of the tools. So when you're working with large code bases, there you have to, and multiple people are working on one code base. Then in order to make sure that you're not stepping on each other's changes, then you have repositories, so you can save different versions of an application and still keep the integrity of the original application. So that's how you make changes in software. So you'll put it on a branch. Once that's ready to go to production, then you'll have a release, and you'll what you would call it merging all of the changes that you've made in your feature branch or your test branch into the production. And then that's how people who are using that application publicly will then see your changes. So DevOps sets up a lot of the pipelines to make sure that the changes that you make aren't going to break the original application. And so if there's an issue with the code, pipelines are supposed to catch some of the issues that may occur before it gets to production. And so you don't have a bug going out to all of the users of that application, and where that could cost a company hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow. Wow. So they can go to We the Source and check that video out from last week.
Yes, it is under the We the Sauce original content tab on We the Sauce.
Awesome. Awesome. So let me ask you this. Working a 9 to 5 time frame is becoming less popular, but are people also spending more or less time at work?
Well, so you say that it's becoming less popular, but people are spending less time.
So let me repeat the question.
Okay.
So working the traditional 9 to 5 time frame,
Mm-hmm.
that's becoming less popular.
Okay.
But my question is, are people also spending more or less time at work? In other words, people are not necessarily working 9 to 5. People might be working from 3 to whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of time, back in the day, people would work 8, 9 hours,
Mm-hmm.
9 to 5. People are not working that time frame like they used to anymore. But would you say, from your vantage point, during the time that you spend in the workforce, Are people still working 8 to 9 hours, or are people working less?
Working is an interesting term. I guess if you're talking I guess from a remote standpoint, like if you're talking about the total amount of hours that somebody is logged on, um, that can be less or more, honestly. I mean, everyone's kind of required to, you know, be there for the 8 hours, but a lot of people's work requires more than those 8 hours. So then that's when you find people working hours way outside, whether it's before or after work, just to make sure that they're getting their work done. Um, During the day, during actual work hours, there's a lot of meetings that go on, so that's where a lot of people aren't getting their work done, which is why it kind of pushes over to, you know, into after hours, or having to get some work done before work hours to make sure that all of their tasks are complete. Um, so yeah, during the actual 9 to 5, it's hard for a lot of people to get work done, especially when there's a interruption every couple of hours or every couple of 30 minutes. So I would say I'd say people are probably on average working more than 8 hours on average. Um, and then there's some people who probably barely work their their actual shift, just get by. So it probably averages out to the same, but I see a lot of people working more. I see a lot of people working less. So
I would think that those people who are at jobs where they are six figures or very close to it, from my from my vantage point, they tend to work more than 8 hours easily.
easy,
And a
yeah.
lot of it has to do with the meetings that you said, because
Mm-hmm.
those meetings, like you said, they take up X amount of time, and then you still got to do your work.
Yep.
So that's why some people they kind of they kind of frown on meetings, especially if there's a lot of them, because if the people who are running the meetings are long-winded or don't have a real grip on when to shut the meeting down, now you end up having to work beyond the hours that you allotted initially to get your work done, because
Mm-hmm.
they still expect your work to be done whatever that deadline
Right.
is.
Yeah, them deadlines, the meetings. I mean, that's a whole. I think everyone who's been in corporate has a secret hate for for meetings or updates, touch points, all of that. Like it's a lot, and it kills a lot of productivity. A lot of times you'll be in the same meeting, you'll be in a meeting about a meeting that was supposed to be a meeting 3 weeks ago, and there's just so much that feels unnecessary. But that's part of the corporate hustle.
So piggybacking, you kind of read my mind where I was going with my next question. Much is made of employees scrolling on social media during their shift.
Hmm.
Do you think technology has actually made the workplace less productive today than, say, 50 years ago? And of course, we know you weren't here 50 years ago in the
Hmm.
workplace, but based upon, what you read about and heard, what do you think? Has technology, because people have instant access to the whole world in the palm of their hand whenever they have their phone around,
Hmm.
has things, speaking about those people that you said are barely working, has the workplace become less productive overall because people can, you think that they're doing one thing, but they're doing something else on their phone?
Um, Technology. If I'm looking at technology as the only culprit, I would say it's pretty neutral again, because the speed now that it's given us to complete a lot of tasks. What would have taken 50 years ago? What would have taken maybe a whole week can be done in a couple of hours now. Um, and in terms of
Wow, that's crazy.
distractions, yeah, in terms of distractions, I think people in if you go into the office, you're gonna find something to distract you if you don't have your phone or not, because that's where, I find in the office a lot of people have a lot more small talk. The difference between working at home, like remotely, and in the office is like you have a lot more random distractions in the office, whether it's somebody coming by your desk, a couple of other people talking loudly. Like, so there's little things that would, negate you from being 100% focused in the office and at home. So I think a lot of people do find themselves being more productive at home because you don't have the, human distractions. And, some people are disciplined enough to, cut out their personal distractions. But there's also technology that tracks people, their usage on the computer. So, some people do want to slack off, and then they get caught, especially if you're using your company's computer to do the slacking off. Then, they have different ways of tracking that, tracking your habits and tracking what you're doing on your computer. So I think that could be a little bit more difficult uh, to slack off in that sense.
It's amazing how you're predicting my questions, because the next thing I was going to ask you, and maybe you can give us some examples, even though you've already sort of slid in that direction. My next question literally was, what types of, and I use the word spyware, maybe that's not the right word, but what type of spyware can employers use to monitor staff productivity?
Right. So if you're using a company's device, so if you're using their laptop, they can track everything that you do on that computer. Um, so they can track every website that you go to. They can track how long you're in front of the computer. And I think it varies company to company. I'm just saying they have the capability to do all of that. And in most companies, they have some type of communication channel, such as Teams or Slack, um, and that's like where you message other employees and set up meetings, things like that. And a lot of times that tracks your availability, so it'll tell you if you're at your in front of your computer, if you've been away for a couple of minutes. So that's one way they monitor you. They see all of your messages to other employees, all of that's public. All the calls that you guys get on is public. So yeah, there's not much you can get away with. I know some companies are getting advanced with it to where they're taking screenshots of your computer while you're working, to make sure that you're doing different things. So that's companies that are spending. To them though, they'll pay 100,000 for a software that does that, to save, if all of their employees are making over 100,000, and they're trying to get the most out of their employees, then that's a small investment for a company to get that spyware on there, and make sure that they're getting maximum output from their employees.
And I have to imagine that with the ability to put cameras in discrete places in the workplace, there has to be cameras all over the place that can also monitor productivity. So it's, by the way, the email, let's say that a person has their own, well, most people have especially if they work in a white collar setting, they have a company email address that people can send them emails. But we just want to caution people. And again, for a lot of seasoned people, they know this, but sometimes with young people coming into the place, they're thinking that this email is somehow private. But if it's a company email, it's the company's email. So if, you know, if you get an email from, let's say, some some vendor that's trying to holler, and you let your communication get out of hand, just remember that those email messages are not private. They belong to the company. So,
And they
and
are tracking it. They keeping tabs on all of it. They know how to, they know how to pick to find it, even if it's deleted. So, yeah, just assume every bit of content that you send from a company device or from a company email is public information. You end up getting it all leaked. So don't talk about anything personal. Just keep it strictly business on those devices.
wow, you said something that most people probably would have never thought. You said even if the person deletes it, it can be resurrected.
Yeah, you're not just delete. You're just not gonna delete the email and oh no, they have ways to get it back for sure.
Wow, that was very important. We're about 20 minutes into the session, and just certain things that you've already shared can put people like years ahead. Because I'm thinking about I'm thinking about folks who may have been in the searching for a new position for months, and
Mm-hmm.
they're thinking, I know I'm qualified because I've already done this work that I'm applying for. And for some people, it could be their resume. It
Mm-hmm.
could be that they're not using the keywords.
Exactly.
So we hope that people will take these tips and adhere to them. Now, let me ask you this. Now that you have been in the workforce for a while now, what tips would you give your 18-year-old self? So considering because in another show you talked about your entry into the workforce as a teenager. So you've been in the workforce for a minute now. When you think about all of your experiences, if you had to sit your 18-year-old self down, what tips would you give that person?
Um, I give them a lot of tips. I'm trying to think if I was. I should have been in. Yeah, I was 18 in 2012. So, yeah, I was not in college yet. Let's see. I think advice I would give my 18-year-old self is take school seriously immediately. The
Wow.
academics part of it, which I think I going to a community college, I wasn't too far off from my focus. There wasn't as many distractions, um, but I could have, doubled down on it and finished with straight A's probably. You know, it was a lot of adjustment just to a new environment. So, but definitely would tell myself to take school serious, take the academic portion of school seriously from the jump. Definitely get more into the network. Take full advantage of all resources at school. That would be my biggest tip to my younger self because there were so many programs that I just wasn't paying attention to that could have taught me a lot in the moment or just put me in different conversations with different people, opened me up to new opportunities. So definitely, and once you leave college, those opportunities are few and far between. So when you're on campus and you see, you know, even just a small job fair, like that's something that 90% of people don't have access to in the world just from that that right there. So When you leave the confines of your college campus and you're really in the and in Atlanta, it's crazy because you don't even feel like you're confined. But like once you're not in, because Georgia State didn't necessarily have like a campus. They're working on it now, but it wasn't like you're in a college town. You're really in the heart of the city. But just the difference of being a student in the city and just a regular person in the city is, um, the difference is drastic. And just the type of rooms that you can go in as a student, curious, people are much more inviting for you to be a student, saying that you're curious. You could go to a museum and stumble on something that you didn't expect. So yeah, definitely just taking advantage of those resources early on, making sure that your grades are good. So, you know, getting in the internship program. So like all a lot of the people who I've known have gone to college since I've gone, a lot of them have gotten internships, and that's translated to much better success post school. Having a position right out of school as opposed to getting out and having to look, because that little gap can throw you off of your you know your rhythm, because you were in rhythm in the school. You knew that you had to pass this class and then get to graduation, so you kind of had things mapped out a little bit more. But once graduation hits, then there's nobody telling you, oh, you need to go talk to this company or you need to go submit. There's no more guidance, so that's when you have to figure it out. But if you get in position while you're still in school, you still have people telling you, okay, from this internship, the people in the company will kind of give you some more direction as opposed to you just getting out on your own and having to find which direction to go.
There's a word that you use that I'm constantly talking to my own offspring about, and then every chance I get, I try to emphasize this, and that word is curiosity. I think that if there's anything that is really, really important, it's to be curious. One of the things that surprises me is how few questions people ask when they're around experts.
Mm.
Dr. George Frazier was talking about the fact that he wrote the book, the pivotal book, Success Runs in Our Race. And, he's spoken all over the world, and he's still a very important public speaker. And he was sharing on a podcast or something that one of the things that surprised him is that, at the end of a talk, he might do a question and and he might have a young person that he thinks in some way he might be able to help. Maybe they're in his industry, marketing or something like that, and he'll give them his card. He said, as of maybe this was a year or two ago that I heard this. I want to say he said he never had anybody to follow up and call him.
Mm.
That's that's outrageous. And I'm not surprised because I'm not to share this on this podcast. Maybe it was another one, another show or something. But I never forget, years ago I was working with a young lady who was seeking to get her own uh, custom fragrance business off the ground, and she also had some talent around designing clothing and so forth. And she got to meet, I can't remember if it was Calvin Klein. She got to meet somebody like that
Mm.
because the guy, speaking to your point, he came to her high school because she went to one of those specialized schools
Mm.
for fashion or what have you. And he came and he was so impressed by whatever she said or what happened, he gave her his card.
Mm.
And she never called him, in part because she lost the card.
Mm.
So, two things. I like that word curious. Some people who have been stuck outside of the workplace for a long time, because when you think about the Fauci that displaced a lot of workers, they're people who've been out of the workspace for 5 or 6 years now.
All right.
And I saw something recently that I haven't really been able to investigate, but it was troubling. I saw something recently that over 300,000 Black women in particular have been displaced out of the marketplace, jobless.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something going on now. But I think that part of the way for people to get back in is by being curious, asking questions, volunteering. I knew a lady who she was already considered she was considered a senior. She was over 65, and technically she had retired from her first career, but she wasn't getting enough in her retirement plan to support her lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So she was trying to get back into the workforce, and she was struggling to do that. So what she did was she decided to volunteer for an organization like the one she would hope to work for.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another way. I know you mentioned for the college age student to intern, and
Mm-hmm.
interning is a great way to mix it up with people who would potentially hire you. But for people who find themselves with experience but locked out of the marketplace, you might volunteer your way into a position, because if you show that you have the skill set that would help push that company forward, even if it's a social service type of organization, when a position opens up, they're going to consider you. So I hope that helps. So I got one more for you, Dre.
Okay.
So let's say it's the year 2040.
Mm-hmm.
Based upon what you know about the tech space and what's on the horizon, maybe stuff that I'm not even aware of, that
Mm-hmm.
you are because you're in that space. It's the year 2040. Describe what you expect to see in the workspace from a technology standpoint. See, you smiling like
Mm. Uh, 20, 40, 15 years.
15 years, sir. Which
What do I?
15 years from now, you're still a pretty young man.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what that might look like because I think the current trajectory of things, I don't know if there would be work per se anymore. Um, it's hard. It's hard to say honestly. I would maybe not focus in on 2040 maybe because I think it could come a lot quicker than that into where we're working side by side with AI to a degree because I don't necessarily feel like AI will get to a point where they can make the proper decisions for a company. I think a lot of that still has to be monitored by humans. Yeah, it's hard. The thing is, right now we're at such a like that exponential change in the that point to where tomorrow things can change tomorrow. Like we have the technology to do a lot more than we're currently doing, but I think right now what we're running into is a lack of full resources. So, you know, with a lot of the environmental issues that AI causes, I think that that's something that we have to look at. Um, and they're already talking about these data centers being very toxic to the environment and the community. So I'm sure that will people will have some type of resistance towards what people want, or like what I'll just say big tech wants in terms of having thousands of data centers that are able to do millions of computations on each one. Um, so I think there'll be a little bit of a stalemate there. People will resist some of the because I think we'll start to see some of the effects of having some of these data centers where they are, and it'll cause some human rights issues. I think it's just hard to say because I think it's really more of a political battle than a technology question. Like the technology in 2040 will be definitely advanced enough to where we wouldn't have to work, but and then that's when people kind of bring in the concept of having a universal in basic income, so where you're rationed out a certain amount of money, and there's not really any work, so people say that can come in handy for people being more creative, but I it's hard to say. I think in general, I think it'll have more people who are entrepreneurs having access to full blown teams. So I think innovation will be pretty big. So just a single person can have the equivalent to a whole company worth of AI bots doing different positions. But big companies would probably still feel more comfortable having humans in those spots just for liability purposes. So
What do you think? How do you think technology will change the landscape for those so-called third world countries? Because when you think about, like I consider the statement that you made, technology allows us to do in a couple of hours what it would take a week to do 50 years ago. And so you take that same technology into a third world country, so-called third world country. Uh, do you think that technology has the potential to, technology in and of itself has the potential to even the playing field, or what are your thoughts?
nah, I don't think I don't think it'll even the playing field because technology is being controlled and how it gets to the rest of the field. So I think in that sense, you can give people a blueprint, but if they don't have the access to the resources to build things, like, yeah, of course they can build it from scratch, but just that time delay, or that extra effort that they have to go in order to gather the resources needed in order to enact some of the plans or some of the blueprints that would be set forth by whether it is AI or somebody solving an equation that hadn't been solved before. um, I think all of that part, that's the part that's being controlled more. So, and I think it's also education about these tools. So, because you can give people in a third world country chat GPT, but a lot of times it's more of the probably the language that they're using to ask the questions. A lot of people in that situation might not know the particular questions to ask in order to better their situation. So it's it's under the illusion that it's for everybody, but not everyone has the right passcode to unlock its full potential. I say that.
That's good. That's good stuff. That's good stuff. And I think that although in many respects it has the potential to change the game. Like you said, it has to do with access. And part of the denial of access has to do with, in my opinion, has to do with greed. Because when we talk about some of those countries that are resource rich, but yet dragging behind the rest of the world, a lot of times it has to do with those people who are in leadership that are not seeing fit to distribute the resources to the people. They are taking advantage of the resources for themselves and their family and their crew, so to speak, but not dispersing the resources so the people can prosper. So eh, one more extension off that same question about 2040. What role do you see robotics, virtual reality? What are your thoughts? I mean, do you have you done any research in those spaces, and how much will those areas of technology step up in the coming years?
uh, so when it comes to virtual reality, I kind of think we're pretty much already there, in terms of just how people interact on social media. Um,
Well,
so
explain that because I don't know what you mean when you said we're pretty much there. How so?
just in terms of the the reality being virtual communication, I think is another reality. Like you can't say that what somebody tweets doesn't affect them in their real life anymore. So technically that's virtual reality. If we're talking full immersive and with the VR headsets and you interacting, I mean, I think that's to come as technology advances, just the hardware itself advances, but mentally I think we're already kind of in a virtual reality to where what somebody puts on Facebook or Instagram has real effects of on their actual life. So that even though it's in a virtual world, it has real life consequences. So that's what I think of when you say virtual reality. um, in terms of people being more immersed into it, I mean, I think it's all leading to a matrix like situation where people can kind of be in their pods and you know entertain themselves or watch whatever they need to, especially if they figure out a way for you to gain physical attributes from being in a like working out virtually. I don't I'm just something technology could possibly do. Like if you train your mind, then you're. But so if we get to that point, then I think that changes a lot of interactions because I think people would want to feel, just in general, I think humans are growing more disconnected to real life and more connected to the virtual reality. So going outside isn't as important as it used to be back in the day because all everyone's friends is already online. So you're now missing out if you're outside in comparison to being inside on a game or on whatever platform you choose to communicate with your friends with. So right now our phones are acting as the interface into the virtual world, and I think it's just gonna, the better graphics it gets, and they have the more real-time FaceTime. So that's all just kind of leading up to that virtual reality world that you're referring to.
You know, you made me think about something I never thought of because I've been curious about virtual reality, and I recently went to a presentation so that I can have a taste of that experience,
Hmm.
and with with the headsets on and all that stuff. And what you said is very true. And when you mentioned pods and people, I mean, they've already sort of enculturated us in that direction using social media. And virtual reality has a potential, if it's able to tantalize our sensory mechanisms. Um, the amazing Nigerian artist Fela, he had this song. I don't know if he wrote it, but he sang it very powerfully, entitled "Zombie."
Mm.
And what concerns me when I think about virtual reality is whether or not it has a potential down the line to be the next drug. Because, of course, people got hooked on now different forms of narcotics and so forth because they were after a particular high.
Mm-hmm.
But what if a person's sensory mechanism through VR could get to that place without them physically having to purchase something from some? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
man, this things can get crazy quick.
These apps are already drugs, honestly. It's giving you artificial dopamine. You know, people feel happy. And then when because you have to look at the effects it has on kids. Maybe not the phone itself is almost, we can't call that the actual drug, but it's like the delivery system for, it's almost like the syringe, you know, and then you click on whichever app and then that's whatever, you know, dosage you get that day. So people scrolling on TikTok, people scrolling on Twitter, you know, it's an addictive, that's an addiction right there. So, and we all have it, you know, so it's not, I'm not saying you know, immune to it or anything. It's just
Absolutely.
it's what
Yep,
we're
me either.
all kind of in it. We're in it, so you know we have to. But like you said, I think yeah, they will be able to figure out ways to take virtual, now virtual drugs or just more so than what these apps already are. And that's one thing me and Nigel that spoke about last episode is the addictiveness of different platforms and you know having to be conscious of that whenever you're building anything online. If you're building a website, you have to be conscious of how addictive, like, you can make something so good to where people don't even need to eat anymore. That's something that you could do, but there's dangers and trade-offs that come
Yeah,
with all
well,
that.
so here's this person wasting away, becoming emaciated because
They
they
can't. They
can't
can't.
stop.
It's so good. It's like I can't. It can really do that. And TikTok is one of the closest things because I look at TikTok and how it keeps my attention is, I like to study a lot of different things. So I'm not just. It's not the same thing. It'll take me from something talking about philosophy, and now I'm doing psychology, and then it's talking about music. So, you got ADHD. It's just scratching all the itches that you have, and then you have someone going into a deep dive about this. So you don't know where you're gonna end up on TikTok, but like one thing with YouTube now gives you so many options you can't even decide where to start a lot of times. So that's kind of, but with TikTok it doesn't even matter. You scroll a couple of times and eventually you're gonna land on something that catches your interest, and from there the algorithm starts working and just like, okay, I know what you want next. Okay, and it knows it so well, so it's custom to us. Are you there? I think we done lost him. Oh, there you go.
Okay, there.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think that this was a very good discussion. I don't know if there are any specific things that you wanted to share that didn't come up in our conversation about your reentry into the workplace. So, is there anything in particular that you definitely wanted to touch on about that experience?
Yeah. So I went on a lot of interviews and I got embarrassed a lot too. Like, it's not all, it's putting yourself in a lot of uncomfortable situations when you're going on some of these job interviews. Some of them you have to hype yourself up and make yourself seem like you have more experience than you do. And in those situations, it can go left, and them ask you a question that you have no clue, you know, what what they're talking about. So I've had some situations like that. But I think after a while, you become so accustomed to, you look at it all as feedback. So, you know, when you do go on a tough interview, now you know a question that you didn't know could be asked before, and you can now prepare and look at, study that, or study a type of question like that for another interview. So it takes a lot of work, and it's you really have to, it's a full-time job, finding the plate. Like, there's so many adjustments that you have to make week after week in order to stay competitive in the job market. So there's new positions coming out every day. So it's, you can't say there's no jobs, because there's hundreds of jobs that are being listed. And people be like, oh, a lot of them are fake jobs. Some of them are, but there's still a good amount that are real opportunities. And so you need to make yourself, you have to put yourself in position to first get and have a conversation with somebody about it. Then you have to, after that conversation has to go good enough for them to pass you on to the actual company to look at. Then you have to go on the interview, and you're talking to different people on their team. So it's a very long process. And take advantage of, while, if you're on the job search, take a look at unemployment benefits. That was something that I hadn't done immediately, which, if I'm ever in that position again, I'll do that pretty soon, just because it's, that's what it's there for. So, don't feel any type of shame using unemployment benefits. That's what you pay your taxes for, and it's there to help you, as you're searching. So, and it's, the requirements aren't that hard. Really, you only have to do uh, three, record three things that you did in relation to your job search. And for me, I was doing 15 resumes a day. So, well, now it's nothing to just tell them, three places that you applied to, if you're really on the, the job search. So, it's doable. It's, it's money there to help you. So take advantage of that. And,
I heard you say in a previous conversation that you treated getting a new job like work, and I didn't want that, because there'll be some people who hadn't seen our previous episode, and so they're watching this one
mm,
on this topic from scratch. And I think that's worth us repeating, because again, some people, going back to all the stimuli we have, some people are out of work, and they're allowing, you know, TikTok and YouTube to eat up all of their hours of the day, and they haven't put in a new resume, or spoke to a new employer in weeks, and they don't realize that it's been weeks.
mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something. You can talk to as many recruiters as you want to, until you start getting some, actual interviews. That's, I think, when I was first looking for a job a couple of years ago. I talked to one recruiter that day and be like, oh, okay, cool. I talked to this recruiter. He said he was gonna get back to me. Nothing up. But now I know you have to talk to every recruiter pretty much. A lot of them use virtual assistants, so that's when I was getting a lot of calls from, like, Indian people, but they were really working for, an agency. Uh, but what they'll do is they'll outsource that part of the job to India, and then they're calling you, making sure that you have all the credentials right, and then they'll pass you on to the manager of the agency, or whatever situation is going on there. So and you're looking in the job, so that's actually a career, but I don't know how well it pays since they're outsourcing it. But yeah, actually, one other thing I wanted to talk about, during my break, I'd been working with my friend who was a DJ, like I told you. So I've been in some studios now, And so yesterday I was talking to a DJ who was a DJ for a big rapper, and he said that their team consists of 20 people for when they go on a tour, and that includes people who do lights, that includes the production manager, stage manager. They have someone who is responsible for playing the music for the rapper or the artist to, perform to. So, and that's by taking all of the stems of the song, sometimes removing the lyrics and stuff. So just as I was talking to him, I realized I was like, damn, there's a lot of different positions that a lot of people don't even necessarily know about. So you can find positions in unexpected places, and that's why when you hear an artist getting paid a couple 100,000 to perform somewhere, it's going towards their team. That consists of also a stylist, that includes tour manager, all of that stuff. So start getting creative at the positions that you're looking for. So if you're someone who does like music or likes live music, maybe you get onto the tour as a lights person first, and learn how to what a tour looks like, and maybe bring your guitar with you and maybe find a break. I don't know, but yeah, just get creative with your job searches, the opportunities that you're open to, and yeah, just try your best and show, you know learn how to tell your story in a way that it doesn't matter what field you're in, people are interested in working with you.
That's good. That's good. And you kept using the word opportunity. I think that it's important to take advantage of opportunity. So you get an opportunity, you get the chance to go on tour with this big time artist. And maybe you're not doing what you really want to do yet, but always put your best foot forward, because there's no telling when the person that you're supporting or helping, if that person has some kind of emergency that makes that person have to bang off the tour. Now this is your chance to step up and potentially shine. And I can't begin to count the different stories I've heard where a person ends up in this amazing position, all because when the position opened up, they were paying attention as the understudy, and now they were ready to step back, step right into the spot. Because the mistake that some people make is they drop back figuring, well, this is not really what I want to do. Um, I'll just wait until what I really want to do opens up to really put my best foot forward. And that so often isn't the right way to approach it. Just like this past Monday, and of course I'm just speculating, but I was watching a football game, and the starting quarterback was out,
Hmm.
and the guy who came off the bench. Now we're talking about professionals. All these guys are professionals. And I was having a conversation with my dad. So this is subjective. This is
Hmm.
my thought. People have different opinions on this. My dad was saying that that guy who came off the bench, he really wanted to do well, but it didn't turn out that way.
Hmm.
And it made me wonder whether he had really prepared for his moment, because again, the starting quarterback is a star in the league,
Hmm.
and the thinking might be, well, hey, I'm not gonna get to play in a game while
Right.
this guy's around. But that guy got hurt,
Hmm.
and so anyway, I just think that, and hopefully this will help somebody. If you've got the opportunity to be somebody's understudy and you're waiting in the wings, don't I don't know how else to say it. Don't half-ass it, because when it's your turn to step up, if you don't take advantage of it, you may not get another chance, because if they feel like you're not a good second man up, they might recruit somebody else that they think is a better second man up. So
In a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. Well, I think that's a solid place to start, with our efforts to condense these for time. I think we got a lot of what we wanted to talk about out of the way. Thank you everyone for joining us for this episode. Uh, once again, do the standard procedure: like, comment, and subscribe. Seeing the numbers go up slowly but surely, and we
and let me
appreciate
say this,
everyone
Dre,
who has.
not to cut you off. Now, let me
Hmm.
say this. There's some people who are watching this, and or you may have come across this, and you're thinking, well, this information isn't for me. I'm balling out of control, so I'm not looking for a job and all of that. But don't just think about yourself. You have a nephew, you you know somebody, and if you don't know anybody, maybe, I don't know, maybe you aren't reaching down enough, because there are people who could benefit from this information. So pass it along. Even if it doesn't impact you personally, pass it on. Share.
Sharing is caring, and we need
Yeah, yeah.
and participate in the comments as well. Comment parts that you like, parts that you don't like. Like I said before, feedback is amazing. That's one of the best things how we could do. So even if you don't share, give us some feedback. Let us know what you like, what you don't, and that gives us direction on how to make improvements. So it's all about doing little changes and hoping for big results. Until next time, guys, we will talk to you and stay blessed.